Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host, Simon Conboy. Today's episode is one of the final 4 entries in the season preview series, and we're focusing on the NFC champions, the Atlanta Falcons. So for those of you who haven't seen one of these episodes before, I'll be going through my projected starters for the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. Of course, we're right in the middle of pre-season now. Camps are almost wrapped up. But I'm pretty sure this will be a pretty accurate assessment of how this team's going to line up in September. Not a huge amount of question marks with this lot. On top of that, I'll be going through the schedule, sort of highlighting the key areas of that schedule where I think the team may need to pick up some wins to be in contention for a high playoff seeding. And then going through what I consider the 3 key areas for this team if they are going to have the same kind of regular season and playoff success they had last year and maybe take that final step to get over the hump in the Super Bowl. So, beginning with the offensive side of the ball, we've got the reigning MVP at quarterback, Matt Ryan. Easily the best season of his career last year. That goes without saying. He's a very good all-round quarterback. Doesn't necessarily have any one particularly exceptional skill trait. Athletically, he's solid. He's got a very good arm, and he plays generally smart football. Has never been a massive turnover machine. I suspect he may revert a bit to the mean. He's been in the league long enough that we can probably look at last season and think it was the exception rather than the rule. He's always been good, but last year, was another level. Lost the offensive coordinator in Shanahan. So I expect a bit of a drop-off, but I still think he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, especially with the weapons around him. And that starts at running back with one of the better pairings in the league, Devonta Freeman, now the highest paid running back in football, which I'm not sure he necessarily should be. We discussed this in the weekly roundup yesterday. He's overpaid for my liking, but he's a good all-round player. He fits what this team does. He can block, he can be an asset in the receiving game, can run inside, outside, kind of like Matt Ryan, where he's a player who's above average in just about every facet, but not truly exceptional in necessarily any, which still makes for a very, very good player. Tevin Coleman is the perfect complement. He's more of an elusive speedster to Freeman being more of a power guy. Once again, an asset in the passing game, which is essential with the way this offense ran last year. Having these two in the backfield just creates a number of matchup issues, as they can both be utilised in so many different ways. The receiving core, pretty good as well. Julio, arguably the best receiver in football. If you don't think he is, he's certainly he's got to be in your top 3. Otherwise, frankly, you're just wrong. What is there to say about him? He can do it all. He is a freak. With Megatron's retirement, he is the biggest physical mismatch at the position in the league. Health is the only thing that holds him back. Mohamed Sanu had a very good season last year. He's a solid possession receiver with the amount of weapons. He's a guy who's savvy enough to get open and make some tough catches for this team. Good chain mover, and Taylor Gabriel gives them a speed threat to pair with Julio. But Taylor Gabriel, your more traditional, smaller speedster, can run all the deep routes. It's a balanced group. There's some guys behind them as well that can even step in and contribute. So there really is no reason to think that this team is going to take any steps back in terms of the talent level on the offensive side. It's very much same as last season for the most part. At tight end, Austin Hooper is still a young player. I expect to see him getting more involved in the offense this season. It's hard to really say too much of him. He wasn't focused on at all last year. He got a few catches, of course. I think he'd probably be able to most benefit the team by becoming a really good blocker, frankly. This team does run the ball a lot. They've got the weapons in the receiving game. If he can become a very good all-round player, then I think that would be a massive boon to this already dangerous group. The offensive line was very good last year, partly because of the ability to stay healthy. only the one change there at the guard spot. Offensive tackle Jake Matthews, I think he really came along last year, having been somewhat of a middling player after being a top 10 draft pick. He played his best pro season. It's safe to say he should get better. He's still not the best pass protector against the speed guys, but I think he's getting there. Ryan Schrader at right tackle does a very good job in the run game. Again, not the best pass protector in the world, but he's certainly a perfectly reasonable player. At guard, Ante Levitra played very well last year after kind of flaming out with the Titans. This scheme seems to fit him very well. And Ben Garland seems to be the guy penciled in to start at guard. Wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see somebody else win that job. I'm not too familiar with him myself. And at centre, Alex Mack, who has been a stellar player pretty much since he entered the league. At centre last year, of course, managed to get a bit more attention being on a successful team before just floundering with the Browns. He's one of the top centres in football. Does a great job in both the pass and the run game. And at kicker, Matt Bryant, who is still a very solid option. Does not miss many, even if his leg isn't necessarily one of the biggest in the league anymore. So yeah, in fact, before I move on, I do give my summary. So it's really pretty easy to summarise this offence. They're going to be very effective again. They played at such a high level last year. They've managed to bring basically everybody back. And, whilst they have lost Shanahan, and I do expect that to have an impact, especially early in the year, where I think there might be a little bit of an adjustment period, I still expect this team to pretty much pick up where it left off and be very difficult to stop. They've got balance, they've got explosiveness, and they can beat you in a variety of ways. There's no reason this group shouldn't be a top 5 offense and battling it out for the number 1 spot over the course of the season. The one thing that could potentially harm back, last year they had total continuity on the offensive line. That's incredibly rare. If that doesn't happen, you're going to see a drop off. It's just natural at that position. But I still think they'll be good enough to overcome it. There's a lot of talent on this side. The defensive side, a bit of a contrast. Not a huge amount of names, but last year they put their faith in young players. It paid off. They should only improve. The team's got a lot faster. Starting with a defensive line, I think this team could end up running a bit of a hybrid 3-4-4-3. I'm really not sure how they're going to approach it this year. At defensive end, though, I've got Grady Jarrett, who was a phenom in the Super Bowl, and he really was playing very well for the second half of last season after a fairly nondescript start. It looks like he's just developing into a very good player, borderline elite defensive tackle, I think, based on his play. So I expect him to be a factor. The other spot's a bit more of an issue. I've currently got Rashid Hageman listed. I think you could see Adrian Claiborne play there because he's got enough size. I don't think he's a great player either, but he plays the run pretty well. I think either one of these guys is probably going to be a rotation. Jarrett's going to be the number 1 guy. The nose tackle spot, they've brought in Dontari Poe. It's a bit of a boom or bust player, generally, Poe. On a play-by-play basis, he's got a lot of talent, and this team did struggle against the run at times last year. If he can help them in that regard, and he's a bit of a mercenary for a nose tackle, goes after the pass a bit too much. But I think if he can play disciplined and play up to his talent level, he's going to be a force and a great addition to this team. And of course, he is playing for a contract, which often motivates players. We've also, moving on to the outside backer spot in terms of pass rush, Vic Beasley really came on last year after a fairly lackluster rookie season, led the league in sacks. He's become a really good speed rusher. I'm not sure there's a huge amount else to his game at this point, but when you can get double-digit sacks every year, you're an asset. I'd just like to see him play the run a bit tougher, add maybe a bit more of a power move to his arsenal. I think if he can do that, he can become one of the elite players on the edge in the league. And I think Brooks Reed, again, Adrian Claiborne can enter this conversation, but I think Reed is a solid option on the outside. he's a lot more disciplined than Beasley. I think you want a disciplined player there. So I think he'll be the primary other outside backer. And then the inside back spot, Dion Jones, who looks like a very good young linebacker. I think he's the leader of this group, and he reminds me a lot of Lavonte David over in Tampa in terms of the way he plays the game. Very fast, a bit more physical perhaps than Lavonte David. And if he can step up his coverage game, I think he'll be one of the top linebackers in the league. And I think Duke Riley will get the start alongside him. Fits the MO for what this team is looking to do defensively. He's a speedy guy. I was a big fan of his in college. I think he was one of the better players in the draft at the position. I think he fits what today's game is. And once he picks things up, I think him and Dion Jones are going to be a really good pair in there together. The cornerback spot, Desmond Trufant's back from injury. That's great news for this team. He was playing very well last year. He's probably a round about a top 10 corner in this league. If he isn't in the top 10, he's not far off. Plays man very well. He's bigger, one of the bigger athletic corners in the league. He can really do a little bit of everything for you. He of course got his monster extension. His health is going to be a massive boon to this team. Robert Alford is an experienced player. I think we could see him play in the slot because I think that's where he does his best work. And I think Brian Poole as well. Sounds like he's going to be the other guy. I think with the suspension, what was the? I should have wrote it down. The second year guy last year who played well. Is it Jalen Collins? I think it's Jalen Collins. Either way, with that suspension, I think it opens up a spot in this corner group. As I say, Alford I like in the slot. I don't know if I trust him outside. The safety spot, Keanu Neal, another one of those young players who stepped up and played really well last season, improved as the year went on. He's a thumper. If he can get support from Ricardo Allen, these two can play really well. I think this defence is going to really take it up another level. The safety play was not the best last year, but Allen's an experienced player. Neal should only get better. This team's really athletic and fast these days on the defensive side, and at punter Matt Bosher. Defensively there's a lot of stuff to like. I still think there may be a year or two, or well, maybe not two, a year away from reaching their potential in all likelihood. A lot of these guys heading into year two, you do sometimes see a little bit of a stutter there as teams do a better job game planning for what guys do. But there is a lot of talent. Trufant being back is big. If they can find some pass rush other than Beasley, and of course they got Tack McKinley, who I just don't think will start. This team's got a lot of depth. He'll certainly be in that rotation, of course, which I absolutely should have mentioned earlier on. But he'll be in there. If they can generate pass rush, if Grady Jarrett can carry on developing, then I think this team could be very scary on the defensive side of the ball. Holding up against the run's a bit of a concern. They're not the biggest team, but there is a lot of speed there, and teams are going to have to pass, I think, to keep up with this offense. So I'm not expecting them to be a great group, but if they can get turnovers, they can get that pass rush, be a splash defense, then I think they'll be a perfect complement to this offense. Now, in terms of the schedule, I do think there'll be a bit of a decline this year. The schedule, first place schedule, never the easiest. Unfortunately, I don't get the bonus of playing the Cowboys without Ezekiel Elliott, so that's tough. But they do have a nice start to the season. The end of the season is going to be the big thing. You've got the Cowboys, Seahawks, Bucks, Vikings, Saints, Bucks, Saints, and Panthers. Every single one of those teams, like the NFC South's wide open, in my opinion. Every one of those teams could be competing with the Falcons for a spot. The Seahawks will likely be competing for one of the high seeds, and the Cowboys certainly could be. And I think it's going to be a really tough race between them and the Buccaneers. So that part of the schedule is, of course, going to be absolutely vital. Play the Bears, the Packers, the Lions, and the Bills in the first few weeks. So You could see them conceivably going 4-0, 3-1 to start the year. If so, then I think they're going to be eyeing up a 1 seed until they hit that rough patch at the end of the year, which is really going to determine how things go. I think they decline a little from last year. I've got them going 10-6, finishing just behind the Buccaneers. I just think the Bucs are a little bit more on the defensive side of the ball. I think there will be a little bit of a downswing on the offensive side with Kyle Shanahan, even though they have looked very sharp in pre-season so far. And I just don't know if they can get outside of the injury to Desmond Trufant, they were pretty fortunate with injuries last year. I think this year they might just face a little bit more adversity. They got a tough stretch at the end, and I just think they might drop a couple of games in amongst that bunch. But I could easily see this team going 13-3 or 14-2 if they can replicate what they were doing on the offensive side of the ball last year. It really does have to feel like Super Bowl or bust after the success of last season. But that is a lot of pressure, and we'll see how it goes. And maybe there'll be an adjustment to the new stadium. Who knows? But in terms of the 3 key areas, for this team to replicate last season, the offensive line is the key. They were very good last year. Matt Ryan had a lot of time in the pocket. They were opening up holes. They were intact the entire season, which is incredibly rare. And outside of Alex Mack and possibly Jake Matthews, there's not a lot of very high-end talent there. They're a group that played better than the sum of its parts. So if there are any injuries, particularly if Mack were to go down, I think we'd see a bit of a drop-off in terms of the offence's ability to play as efficiently as they did last season. Matt Ryan, as I mentioned earlier, last year was the exception rather than the rule of Matt Ryan's career. He has been a very good quarterback, but he's never quite broke into that absolute top tier category until last season. So we've got to see whether that's the norm or whether he's going to revert back to his previous form, which, as I say, still good enough to lead your team to the playoffs, but can he play like a perennial MVP candidate? Obviously, that's going to be huge. If he can play on last year's level, this team is going to be very, very hard to stop once again. And the run defense. As I've mentioned with a lot of the higher powered offenses, that's what teams are going to try and do to you. They're going to try and slow games down. This defense, I think, is built to play against the pass primarily. They're a smaller, speedier group, and I think some of the power running teams, and there's quite a lot of them that they'll be going up against this year, may be an issue for them. Now, if the run defense can hold up, I think they'll be fine against the pass. Their linebackers can cover. They've got a reasonably solid secondary if the safety play can just improve a tad. And if they can just stay off the field, they're going to be up there. So there you have it. That's the 2017 Falcons. As I said, I just think there's going to be a bit of a downswing somewhere, but I do think when it comes playoff time, this is going to be a team that's going to be ready and motivated to try and get back next year to the Super Bowl and take that one extra step and win it all. They're certainly going to be competing up there all season. It looks like a really good roster. We've seen the Super Bowl hangover, and I'm just expecting a little bit of it. It's hard to say I think this team will go 10-6, so I really look at them on paper and think they could do better. But there's just a nagging part of me that suspects that won't be the case. So let me know, what do you guys think? Do you think the Falcons are going to improve upon what they did last season, win the Super Bowl, or just have a really good regular season record and get bounced? Do you think this team's improved at all? I mean, the offensive side is pretty much the same. Do you think they'll maintain that same level of play with Shanahan gone? Give us a shout, whether it's in the comments section below, the Cover Zero Facebook page, or find me on Twitter at Simon Conboy. Always happy to talk football. If you've enjoyed this, check out some of the rest of the show. Only got 3 teams left this week. Everyone else is up there. We've got the Cover Zero Roundtable. Had an episode go up yesterday where we're just talking all things football. I think they're really enjoyable, so give those a shot. And as ever, if you could like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon. It'll all be thoroughly, thoroughly appreciated. Really do appreciate people checking out the show. It's great stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening, and go Bucks.